This week on the Honor Roll podcast, we'll be talking with honor student and fellow podcaster Tianyi Li Bueso about her journey from Honduras to USF and how she transformed her passions into projects. Coming up next. Hey Honors Bulls, welcome to the Honor Roll Podcast, the flagship podcast of the Judy Genshaft Honors College Podcast Network. I am your host, Fabiana Requena, a second-year student studying marketing and business analytics at the University of South Florida and a member of the Honors College. Today, my co-host is Caroline Merriman, a third-year student studying English and biology. How's it going, Caroline?
Hey everyone, just really excited to be here again.
Great, and as always, we like to start off the podcast with one big question. So my question this week is, what are you looking forward to in the fall semester?
I think the thing that I sit over summer and kind of miss is just seeing all of my friends and having like fun activities and extracurriculars to look forward to. Like the cab nights out and working with all the organizations that I work with. And so over the summer, even though it's nice to have the time to rest, I kind of miss like all of that interaction and having fun events to look forward to.
For sure. I think I kind of miss the structure sometimes over the summer that you lack. Even if you're doing like online classes or internships, there's something about coming to campus and like going to class that you kind of just miss, and seeing new people, meeting new people in your classes. So I get that for sure. Actually, today we have a student, Tianyi Li Bueso, who will be here to talk about all of her passions and projects, involvements that she will be a part of this fall. Coming up next.
I'm Charles Adams. I'm the Judy Genshaft Endowed Honors Dean at the Judy Genshaft Honors College at USF. My favorite honors memory is hard to identify. I have so many wonderful memories. But one recent event that stands out is the opening of our beautiful new building on the Tampa campus. It is the finest honors facility in the country, and I am so proud of what we've achieved here.
Hi everyone, today we are joined by USF student and fellow podcaster Tianyi Li Bueso. She is here to share her story with us now. Tianyi, would you like to introduce yourself and share a bit about your background and your interests?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Tianyi. You can say it however you want. In Spanish, it's actually Tianyi, and in Chinese, it's Tianyi, so you can literally call me whatever you want. I'm currently double majoring in statistics and quantitative economics and econometrics with a minor in Chinese language. I still get stuck saying that. And yeah, I'm originally from San Pedro Sula, Honduras, so I'm far away from home.
So you immigrated here from Honduras. How did you end up at USF?
So actually, my sister lives here around in Tampa, and I remember coming to USF, and I drove down Leroy Collin Boulevard, and with all the trees, and I was like, I'm sold. I love it.
It definitely helps that the campus is really pretty.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. At what age and did you move here, and what was difficult for you to leave your home, and just what things do you miss?
Oh, I'm an international student, so I came here freshman year around 3 years ago. Honestly, I love it here. I feel like I really needed that change from just the same thing I knew my whole life. I've never actually moved until I moved here. I feel like even if I moved houses, it would have been a little fun. But I also went to a K through 12, so it was the same people my entire life. So coming here was a really good refresher, I feel like.
Do you think, did you struggle in any way to kind of get out of your comfort zone just because you're making that college transition, but you're making it in a new country? Was there some kind of shift there that you had to experience?
For sure. So I knew how to drive back home, and then driving here is a whole different thing. I actually have to follow rules here.
Yeah.
And I feel like my English was pretty good coming in, but then when I got here, it was just I was missing a lot of the slang and a lot of just little words that I feel like I just didn't understand until I got here, because I learned English from TV and stuff. I also think I had a different idea of what I thought college was going to be. And then when I got here, I was like, oh, this is not like the movies.
Yeah, there's definitely a different way that it's portrayed completely differently. Was there any kind of culture shock, I guess, to coming here?
I think there was this idea that people were colder in America for some reason. I don't know. I come from a Hispanic household. And so there was always this idea, and people talked about it in school, that people in America or in the U.S. were not as nice, but that hasn't really happened to me. So,
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I feel like a shock in a good way.
USF has a lot of like multicultural like communities and organizations. Were you kind of able to settle into, being able to relate to people culturally? And were there any like organizations that kind of helped you like facilitate those interactions?
Oh, for sure. Coming in, I feel like I had kind of like boxes that I thought I had to fit into. I was like, I'm Chinese, but I'm also Honduran. But then at the same time, I was like, I'm not 100% either of them. So I felt like I wasn't going to be able to relate. But then I got here and you meet so many different people who have such mixed backgrounds. And once you meet those kinds of people, you realize we're not so different after all. Like, I always felt a little ashamed in the fact that my Chinese is not perfect. And then you get here and you see people with, like, wearing their country, like, on their sleeve, and they're so prideful of it, and they don't even speak the language. And I'm like, oh, it goes so much beyond the boundaries of what you think makes you a certain kind of person.
For sure. So let's talk a little bit about your podcast. You currently host your own podcast called Let's Talk About That. Can you tell us a little bit about the topics that you cover, what you talk about, and what your favorite thing is about doing it?
Yeah, for sure. My little baby, my pride and joy. I actually started this podcast 4 years ago. It was in quarantine. I feel like it doesn't feel like that long of a time, but then when you really think about it, that's such a long time to be speaking to myself.
Yeah.
But I started the podcast because during quarantine, I'm a pretty anxious person. So I felt like I needed just to talk my feelings out. And because we couldn't physically speak to each other, I was like, might as well just talk to myself. And at the beginning, actually, I didn't share with anybody because I was too embarrassed of it. So I had like 10 episodes and no listens. But it was such a good outlet, like to just let things out, kind of like journaling, where I can just speak them out loud. And then they feel like a little less like of a burden on me because it's just me and my own thoughts. And I feel like over time, it's been such a nice way to be able to look back on my own journey without even realizing it. And it's almost like hearing myself tell my own story in the best way possible. And I like being able to see how I've grown over time and how things change over time, and like the fears I had before and the way I overcame those fears. And today I can just look back and be like, that was so silly that I was so worried about that back in the day.
No, talking to yourself is like underrated. Like,
when did you decide to like go public with your podcast, and like how did you make that decision?
Actually, I remember this very vividly. I was at home, I was doing the dishes, and I got a random Instagram DM from somebody that I had no people in common with. And she said, "Thank you so much for speaking about it. I feel the exact same way." She was like, I listened to it. I just randomly popped up on my Spotify page. And I was like, there's somebody listening out there. Like, this is crazy. And I saw the statistics, of course. Like, I have 10 monthly listeners or something. But until you actually make that connection, it feels like they're, like, not real. Like, they're just numbers, and it's so easy to get lost in the numbers. But when you think about it, I'm like, 10 people out there used to listen to this all the time, and they, like, know my voice, and they probably don't even know what I look like. And so I was like, that was the moment that I was like, I should, like, share with my friends. Like, what if somebody out there, what if somebody who follows me or somebody who just meets me wants to also talk about it, but they feel like they can't just approach me with it? And I feel like it's also such a nice way to bridge the gap, because then it doesn't have to be such an abrupt, like, I want to talk about mental health. You know what I mean? They can listen to it, and then we can, like, definitely, because I love talking about it. So I definitely want to, like, bond over it, too.
Yeah. Has your approach to, like, making episodes, like, changed, like, as, like, you've kind of gotten more listeners or as you've kind of gotten more experience?
100%. At the beginning, it's almost a little cringy, honestly. Because I was just, like, talking to myself completely, and it's almost so sporadic, because when you talk to yourself, right, you're not thinking about anybody listening to it, so you can jump over thoughts because you know what you're thinking.
right.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, I have to make an outline so people know what I'm actually trying to get to. And so I feel like it's gotten so much more organized over time.
For sure. There has to be some sort of like flow, structure of how, and we do the same thing when we host the podcast. Do you have any tips for us or any aspiring podcasters?
Any critiques?
Any critiques?
Okay, I feel like that's a hard one. But personally, I feel like talking about what you actually like helps the most. Like bringing up the things that really worry you and that you feel passionate about, because sometimes we might get lost in like, I'm the only one who feels this way. Like there's nobody out there because it's so hard to make connections like in the day to day. And so I feel like once you're completely 100% your genuine self, that really shines through and people can tell like when they listen. I feel like the episodes in which I'm like just speaking out of my heart and like speaking my real thoughts, those get so much more listens than the ones where I'm just like, well, today I went to the grocery store because I'm not trying to like inconvenience anybody because there's definitely a niche for anything you can think of
Absolutely.
out there.
I think too, like there's so much media today and so much of it is so meaningless that like when you are actually like authentic, like people very much connect with that, and it's really important to people to find somewhere or someone who they feel is actually being honest.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also many more people than one might think. I feel like at the beginning I was like, maybe one person out there? It's definitely more than one. I feel like people, we're all so similar, but we don't even realize it until we start looking for other people like us.
Yeah. So kind of what's your goal for the podcast? What are you hoping that others get from listening to your voice?
I want my podcast to be an outlet. I want you to be able to turn it on and disconnect from the troubles and the worries that are going on in your own life. I want it to almost be a mirror, a mosaic of several different things that when you listen, even if it's just a little piece, you're like, I feel like that. I connect to that. Yeah. And so that you don't feel like all these troubles and all these burdens are just you and your own like little world, because at the end, it's not. I want it to be able that so that when someone plays and they listen, they're like, I feel this connection to somebody else out there. And they kind of snap out of this like individuality mentality. Because I feel like it's only that way in which we form community that society can actually improve as a whole.
Yeah. I love those little moments if I'm listening to a podcast or watching a video and I really connect to something like that. I like pause and smile and I'm like, like I relate.
It's the same thing with like music. Like you can really relate to an artist and like form what feels like a very real relationship with someone who you've not really met. But I think it's really necessary when there's a lot going on in your life, and like not everybody always has somebody, or maybe the people around them aren't people that they can relate to. And so I think that's been a really cool thing about the way that media has taken off recently, is there's so many forms and so many places that you can find someone to relate to when you feel really alone.
It's so much harder to stand up for yourself when it's just you. There's definitely like strength in numbers, and that's definitely the overarching goal for this podcast, I guess. Right.
What kind of topics do you cover like on your podcast?
Oh, everything. Literally everything. Because of course some weeks are less intense than others. Yeah. And so sometimes I'm literally talking about like how I'm going over my anxiety and how I've personally like started seeing a therapist, or how I can form connections with other people, how to make friends, how to approach like a first date. But then sometimes it's literally just like study tips, the books I've read in the past week, because I feel like there's a niche out there for everybody. Yeah. So, and sometimes, of course, you don't want to listen to a very sad episode every single week. Yeah. So it's nice to take a breather sometimes too.
Yeah. How have you like curated your voice and your vision as like a creator?
Oh wow, what a good question. I've never been asked that before.
Deep. Yeah.
Sorry. I noticed that I speak very upbeat, and sometimes when I speak about something not so happy, there's kind of that mismatch, and I definitely cope with humor as well, so it can be like kind of hard. So sometimes I have to remember that people listening out there might not know me personally, so I have to remember to also curate my way in a way that is more applicable and more open to everybody, so it doesn't feel like kind of like an inside joke or a little click that somebody doesn't understand. So I feel like by being able to just like discuss broader topics and also just like really be honest with yourself and like really lay yourself out there, when you lay all the facts, people are like, oh, I feel like I know this person. I feel like I know what their lives are like. And I feel like that's when the connection really begins.
Yeah. I think that goes to show that you want to be inclusive and make everybody feel welcome. And I think you've done that a lot as an RA. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what it's like to work with a large group of students and people from different backgrounds? How do you make them all feel at home?
I love being an RA. I know a lot of people might not say that, but I love it. Honestly, so I kind of became an RA by accident. I'm not going to lie. I was just looking for a job and I didn't really know what it was, but I still applied. But then I fell in love with it immediately. I'm such a people's person. I'm such a social being. And I feel like I thought that I knew a lot about a lot, but it wasn't until I became an RA and I actually met people from different backgrounds who thought different things and had difficult conversations that I was like, I might not know a lot about anything. So I feel like there's definitely a lot of bridging the gap being an RA, and I feel like it's such a great experience, especially like coming into a new country in which you can really get to discover and get to learn about different cultures like firsthand because you're speaking to people every day.
Hi, my name is Sanjeev Varma, and I'm a current rising sophomore majoring in business analytics and information systems, and I'm a current student, part of the Judy Genshaft Honors College. My favorite honors memory would be at the end of last semester when I was wrapping up my geographical perspectives course, and we had a fiesta to kind of end off the semester where my classmates and my professor each brought a unique dish from each one of our cultures, and we shared that on the very last class of the semester. You know, kind of trying all these different types of foods introduced me to these types of cultures, and that was kind of a completing and like a fulfilling experience to end off the course, and it's definitely one of my most fond memories.
Could you tell us a bit more about like your role as an RA, like kind of what your responsibilities are?
Yeah, what are the duties of an RA?
Yeah, for sure. So there's, of course, technical duties, just like checking fire extinguishers and checking rooms and stuff like that. But I feel like the real fun part comes twice a month. We have these like one-on-one conversations with each student in your floor or in your pod. And you just talk to them about academics and social identities and the situation, what they're going to do for the summer, for the winter. And I feel like you can really see a person grow throughout the year, which is so beautiful. When you see them have a problem and get over with it, you almost feel like a teacher, even though I really am not. I'm just like, I'm recording all of this, but you're doing so great. I'm so happy for you. And so many friendships, like real genuine friendships come out of it because you're spending that time like sitting down, maybe sometimes an hour just to speak to them. And you're really like asking questions about them. And you'd be surprised how many people really just need that outlet to talk.
Yeah. It's like a little podcast. Everything comes back.
Little therapy session.
Yeah.
So what has your experience been like as a leader and mentor of such a diverse group of students?
It is so rewarding. I mean, I feel like even I grow as a person. I learn as a person by speaking to them because there's clubs, there's organizations, there's conferences that I didn't know about and that are so applicable to me, and that if it wasn't for me having that connection, I probably would have never known about them. I mean, as we said earlier, there's such a exposure in media everywhere. There's such like a oversaturated network of everything going around.
Yeah.
So it's so hard to like find that specific information. But when you have these connections and you hear it firsthand, it's almost like you trust it more than if I just were to see an ad of it, like in the MSC or something. So it's definitely been such a, like a learning journey this entire time.
I think that kind of shows the importance of like not just engaging in community and like talking to people, but actually like curating community and like seeking out those opportunities, not only like for yourself, but to help provide that like for other people. Because I mean, you get something from that in return.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure. I also, last year I had a floor with a lot of athletes. So it's so interesting to see the different needs that each group of students has. My first group of students was all freshmen, and then this last group of students I had were all graduate students.
Oh, wow.
So it was such a shift to see the things that they talk about, the things that they wonder, the help that they need. And you also have to be like kind of like feel tactful on whether like how much help you need. Like they need, because sometimes I feel like I just want to be there for them all the time. Like, what do you need? But like a graduate student definitely needs much less help and much different help than like a freshman.
Yeah.
How do you provide like advice or support to somebody that's older than you in that sense?
This year was definitely a little harder. But I feel like being an RA, you have so many like helping hands, which is so great, because I'm not graduating, but I have friends who graduated or other people on my staff who graduated, and I have my boss too. And I feel like everybody together, it becomes such a, like a melting pot of ideas. So if you ever need anything, you can just like voice it out, and there's always somebody to help you, which is
really
so
nice.
nice. Yeah.
How have you felt like you found your community here at the Honors College specifically?
I love the honors. Sorry, everybody probably says that. It's so cliche. I say this all the time, but I feel like the Honors College is such a fundamental building block that I wish everybody could have.
Yeah.
I think, especially USF being so big, it's such kind of like it's so unfortunate that many people don't get to experience it. But truly, the classes that they teach here, they open your eyes like none other. I feel like it's a skill that many people don't really think about when coming into college. But critical thinking is not something that you just learn in a math class or learn in an English class. And so having the honors college, I feel like, helped me almost become a better RA because you really open your eyes to like a much wider like set of viewpoints.
For sure. For me, I felt like honors classes just like stimulate you in a way that other classes or other core classes, since you take a lot of business classes, I imagine, or math, statistical classes, STEM classes. How do you bridge that gap between like all the interests that you have, which tend to be kind of more on the artistic, creative side, and then all of these like analytical, logical, just like math type subjects?
I should be asking myself that question. It's definitely hard because there's, of course, semesters where you do more math classes and semesters where you do more of like Chinese classes and honors classes. And so I feel like sometimes I get lost in the STEM world and I start seeing things a little too black and white. So it's so nice having the honors college as like a refresher. And it definitely helps me also practice my writing and reading. But I feel like it's so nice to have it like a blank slate where you come in and it's kind of like a new adventure every day almost because math classes build on each other so much. But an honors class feels like it's you, and it's bringing an open mind is the most important part of it all.
I think like one thing with the STEM classes as well is you can really settle into a one-track mind.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really nice to like balance that out with the honors classes that kind of remind you, especially when you're someone who's interested in a lot of different things, is like you don't have to choose one or the other. You don't have to go conventional route or have a conventional job. Like you can find places that exist in between, and all of the things you can love can be in your life. You don't have to like be like, oh, well, I love art, but I'm going to go solely just do economics or something like in your case. Do you have like a favorite honors class you've taken or one that like really impacted like you, like yourself?
I have two. Is that valid? Can I talk about one?
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
I took a poetry class with Professor Singh, and I'm not good at poetry at all. I'm not a writer, but taking that class was so fun, and I feel like I learned about myself. I was like, it's so nice to try out something new and practice a muscle that you didn't really ever like experience with before. And I feel like I went on his podcast too recently, and it was just like, it's so refreshing talking to him because you get to read your own poetry and you get to read other people's poetry. So you get to almost like a little window into other people's minds. So that was really cool. And then I also just took my capstone class with Professor Ruth, and that was fascinating. I learned so many new things. I feel like sometimes when people think of an honors class, they don't think about actually learning like contextual things. But I feel like I learned so much history throughout that class. I learned so much about like current news in the class. I think he was a news reporter before. And so his perspective on things is so like interesting because he has all this background knowledge. And so when he approaches like current news, he can tell you like, well, this has happened in the past, so I think this might happen right now. And it's like, wow, I really have only been in this world for like 1 second, haven't I? Like I really don't know much about anything. So that class, I would 100% recommend that class to anybody.
Has like taking those classes like changed how like you see your own future or how you're going to like apply your degrees and your like interests to build some kind of career?
Yes, like you have no idea. I mean, just like you said, being in that STEM field, sometimes you feel like it's like a one-track mind. There's only one lane you can go down. But then you come to the honors college and you see so many different people who have done so many different things. Some people who've had like whole careers and whole professions, and then they come back to being professors. And I'm like, I don't have to fit myself into that one tiny box that I thought I had in my mind. Like, it's endless possibilities. And as long as you're confident in yourself and you use those skills and you are open-minded to apply them in any kind of field, I feel like you really get to like experiment with everything and have fun with it while you're doing it, and really just open your mind to any possibilities that there might be any chances.
Yeah. How do you feel that being so multifaceted, given that you have a double major in something that's very STEM and then having a minor in Chinese? How do you feel that that's going to shape your future and your career and everything?
So most people that I talk to who are studying the Chinese track, they do it because of all the opportunities and the chances. But I actually took it on because I was kind of forgetting my Chinese when I came to college. So I was like, I wanted that refresher, and I picked up the minor. And it's so nice to like meet people that I definitely would have never met before. Usually people who are in the College of Arts and Sciences stick to that, or who are in Muma College, they stick to that.
Yeah.
And so having that kind of like outlet to experience life with other people kind of like shapes you and reminds you that there's so many open doors out there, and that like one closed door doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things.
You've done so many different things and you have so many different passions, and I think sometimes that does make it hard to like nail down like who you are, like who am I if I have all these passions and where do I fit into the world. What advice do you have for students who are also like trying to find themselves?
I think we shouldn't get caught up in the little quotidian things. I feel like sometimes it's the smallest things that lead to like downfall. I think we need to remember that at the end of the day, we're people who change. Change is the only like constant. We're constantly changing and becoming new versions of ourselves. So it's okay to give yourself the freedom to experiment and give yourself the freedom to try anything you want to. Because if not now, I mean, when? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's so important to tap into those creative outlets, to be able to actually remind yourself, oh, actually, this is why I like this. This is why I like math. This is why I like econ. Because like I tried all these other things, and even though I like them, I don't like them as much as I like this one thing. And so I feel like it's important to really be like well-rounded, because if not, you might always feel like that sense of curiosity of like, what if I did this thing, or what if I did that?
How do you kind of like make the time to balance, you know, like if you want to try so many things, like how were you able to balance doing so much that you could kind of give yourself the time and space to experiment and kind of narrow down what you actually want?
Well, I'm very organized. I try to keep a calendar as well as I can. But I feel like you also have to just like, if you have 5 or 10 minutes, that's not too little or too much time to do anything. I mean, if you want to go for a run, you can do so. If you want to try out a new club, if you have like an extra 5 seconds, you can just like check out something new. And it doesn't have to be this like, I have to commit to crocheting for the rest of my life. Like you can just pick it up. You can go to a thrift store and try sewing. You can like try so many, like there's especially so many free things for students around campus. I mean, any given night you go to the MSc and there's like 10 events going on. And I feel like so many times I've just like, I wonder what's in there. And then you just set foot in and people are so welcoming. And then it's like that you like start to pick up things that you actually really like after like seeing so many different things.
Yeah. I think that brings me to my next question, which is what advice you would give to like incoming honor students or freshman honor students that are trying to find their path, find themselves?
I would tell them not to rush themselves. There's a lot of time and there's a lot of opportunities. So I feel like we got to remember that this isn't a race with anybody else out there. It's not a competition. It's not a game. Everybody's on their own different journey. So cliche, I know. But everybody, every single person, people sometimes choose completely different majors based on this one class, or maybe they already knew they wanted to be a doctor ever since growing up. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Everything you feel about yourself, like you know yourself best. You know yourself better than anybody else ever would. So I feel like it really comes down to trusting yourself. And it's then that you're going to give yourself the opportunity to try new things. Because if you don't believe that what you want is important, you're never going to be able to try all the things that you want to. I feel like it's once that we really analyze and sit down with ourselves and I'm like, what do I want to do? What makes me happy? That you really like start finding keywords and you start finding events, you start finding people that you feel really like drawn to and attracted to. And I feel like I hope people give themselves that like open window and just that confidence to try new things.
That's when you really start like having fun in college, is like when you find those things that like make you excited like to attend. You're not like, oh, I have to go to this thing. It's like, oh, I get to go be a part of this organization and it doesn't feel like work anymore.
Yeah.
So what are your plans for the future? I know you're heading into your senior year in the fall. So how do you feel going into that?
So I actually want to pursue a master's in public relations. I feel like I've done all the coding, I've done all the sit down, all the math, and I really want to get out there and have more of like that client-facing position. And I could really see myself just like talking to people and making connections, networking, and like just like creating publicity for events and stuff like that. So I feel like whether it's in Tampa, Florida, or anywhere else, I'm super open to just like start my life. I'm so excited.
Yay. Well, it has been a pleasure getting to hear about your journey, not only as an honor student here at USF, but also how you express yourself and your identity. So thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us back in the studio. Well, Fabiana, what do you think about the podcast today?
I loved hearing about Tianyi's own podcast and how she gets to just talk about kind of whatever she feels and how she uses it as an outlet and kind of like journaling. And I really enjoyed hearing about that.
Yeah, I really like how she noted all the different ways that she's kind of mentored students, but also kind of worked to create points of connection and spaces for community in her life, and not only for herself but for other people.
Absolutely.
I think that's really meaningful for a lot of students who you're on your own for the first time, and so I think that's probably helped a lot of people feel at home in a really new situation.
Yeah.
So speaking of community and staying involved, don't forget to check the Honor Roll newsletter and our website at usf.edu/honors for all upcoming events, updates, and news.
That will do it for this week's episode. The Honor Roll podcast is recorded in the Judy Genshaft Honors College at the University of South Florida Tampa campus. Production assistance is provided by honor student Abby Malloy and Professor Adam Davidson. Thank you all so much for listening. Please do not forget to rate and review our podcast. We really appreciate your feedback. Tune in next week for more stories from the Judy Genshaft Honors College.
Until next time, go Bulls!